It's good to see you guys. You're up in Boston?
Yes. Well, I'm technically in Worcester right now, and Josh is in, where are you, Holliston?
Holliston, which is basically the woods, like 20 miles out of Boston. So
yeah, I worked in Worcester, Massachusetts. There was a place there called the Centrum.
Mm-hmm.
Worcester. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still there. And Frank Sinatra was one, I think maybe he was the first show that they had in that venue when they first built it.
Yeah.
Were you with Frank when you were there?
I toured it, yeah, with Frank. You know, and I have a great story that we can tell you. Are we on the air now? Or are we rolling now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we're rolling.
I'll tell you a quick story that I treasure, and I talk about it in my one-man show. In Worcester, Massachusetts, one night Frank did the show, and afterward I went to the restaurant not far from, right across the street from the Centrum, with the band, a bunch of guys in the band, and the guitarist Ron Anthony said to me, "See those two young girls over at another table?" I said, "Two pretty young girls," and he said they wept all during Frank's show, and they laid flowers at his feet while he was singing, and they sat and they wept. And I said, "Really?" And as I was checking out after would get my coat, it was cold, and I had checked my coat in, and the two girls came up, and one of them said, "Oh, you're funny. We really enjoyed your show." I said, "Thank you." I said, "Can I ask you a question? How old are you?" And she said, "I'm 20. And I said, "And how old's your girlfriend?" She said, "That's my sister. She's 18. And I said, "The reason I'm asking, you seem awful young to be Sinatra fans." And she said, "Well, my mother and father loved Frank Sinatra. And all of our childhood, we heard Frank Sinatra music. They actually had a blow up of his album put on the mantle in the living room. And my mom and dad died last year, 4 months apart. And my dad died first." And she said, "My mom died. And before she died, my sister and I were by her bedside talking to her one night, and she was telling us that we were actually conceived of Frank Sinatra's music, that they used to play Frank Sinatra's music when they made love." And she said we were actually conceived of his music. So tonight, while we were watching the show, we felt our parents' presence there, and that's why we laid flowers at his feet, and we cried. And it was a very touching story. And about 2 weeks later, I'm at Frank's house, and I was telling him this story, and he said to me, "Did you get their name?" And that was the biggest mistake I ever made, because I know he would have sent them something, and I didn't. I was so taken by the moment, you know. But it made me realize that there were probably thousands of children around the world that were conceived of Frank Sinatra's music, you know.
Well, yeah, if you want to create a mood, a romantic mood, Frank was definitely the go-to.
What would Frank put on?
Yeah, really, yeah. Would Frank put himself on when he was trying to get someone in the mood?
You know, that's a great question. John Wayne once said to him, he was in a bar with John Wayne and Catalina Island one time. He said it was like 2:00 in the morning and a bunch of guys in a bar. And one of Frank's songs came on the jukebox, you know, one of those lonely saloon songs that Frank would sing. And John Wayne looked down the bar, and all the guys were looking down at their drink. And John Wayne turned to Frank and he said, "Who do you listen to when you feel like these guys?"
I think the real question here, Mr. Dreesen, is how many children were conceived while listening to one of your albums?
Well, you know, there were a lot of breakups over that time. Even on my album while they were in bed. Sleeping in an old Nash Rambler, not my car, an abandoned car where the front seat went down. It was up on blocks. And I'm hitchhiking to the Comedy Store, begging to work for free every night, you know, waiting in line with all the other guys. And I'd been in show business for 6 years. Now I'm waiting in line with 18 and 19-year-old kids, hoping to get on for free at the Comedy Store. And finally, after a month, I got an audition with Mitzi, and I passed and became a regular. And, you know, boom, boom, boom. And a year goes by, and next thing you know, I'm on the Tonight Show, and my whole life changed. You know, one appearance on the Tonight Show. In 1975, wherever you went in America, people say, "What do you do for a living?" You say, "I'm a stand-up comedian." The next question out of their mouth was, "Oh, yeah? You ever been on Johnny Carson?" You haven't been on Johnny Carson. In the eyes of America, you weren't a comedian. You might want to be one or going to be one. So Freddie Prinze did one appearance, got a sitcom the next day. I did one appearance, and CBS signed me to a development deal the following day. A guy named Lee Curlin from New York saw me from CBS and changed my whole life. I mean, you know, my wife and I were separated in the beginning, or back. I brought my kids back to the West Coast, and I never stopped working from that first Tonight Show. I did 61 appearances on the Tonight Show, but I never stopped working. And finally, Frank Sinatra wanted me with him. Sammy Davis had me with him for 3 years. And then Frank Sinatra took me on the road for 14 years. And you know, the rest is history.
Were you with Sammy Davis before the Eye or after the Eye?
Before after the eye, you know.
Oh, okay.
You want a great story? Frank Sinatra had a bodyguard named Jilly Rizzo. He had one eye. He had it knocked out in a fight. Sammy Davis Jr. had one eye. One Christmas, Frank bought a set of binoculars, sawed them in half. He sent one to Sammy and went to Jilly.
Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Hilarious. How long total did you tour with Frank? I mean, was it like 20 years?
No, almost 14 years. I mean, I knew him,
Okay.
but it was almost 14 years in 45, 50 cities a year. A guy from the New York Times once wrote that I was on stage with Frank Sinatra more than any other artist because Pat Henry had toured with him before me, but Frank was doing film in those days, movies in those days. When I toured with Frank, we were doing concerts, 20,000 seat arenas, all around the country, big arenas, and 40,000 people in Hawaii. For a comedian, and you understand this. It's one thing going on stage in a comedy room and there's 120 people, and it's another thing going on stage in front of 40,000 people, and
Where they're not expecting comedy.
Josh, by the way, Josh, this is what I'd say to you, Josh. You're opening for Frank Sinatra. This is what happened to me every night. Nassau Memorial Coliseum or wherever. I'd say, Josh, it's 5 minutes before the show. Josh, there's 20,000 people out there, and I want you to go out there, Josh. You're in the round. I want you to stand in the center of 20,000 people, and for the next 40 minutes, I want you to make them laugh. Oh, one more thing, Josh. I want you to hold their attention and make them laugh, but I want you to make them laugh when you want them to laugh. I want you to pull the strings on the emotions of 20,000 people. No props, no tricks, no charts, no special arrangement, no orchestra, nothing. Just you and 20,000 people. And one more thing, Josh, not one of them came to see you.
That's no anxiety at all.
And that's what I had to do every night. Fortunately, I had some experience. I toured with Sammy for years. I had done a lot of Tonight Show, so I had some experience, and the audience some of them had seen me in these shows, so that helped a little bit. But it was intimidating every night to go out there and get that audience, because sometimes they were still filing in, and first of all, the orchestra, the lights would go down low, and people go, whoa, and the orchestra go, bum, ba, da, dum, ba. They go, ah, because they think Frank's coming out. And then the comedy started,
no.
show Tom Dreesen, now you hear, oh, as you're going to the stage, But I would
that almost seems like it's cruel to start like New York, and then have you walk out into that.
Yeah.
That seems like a cruel joke to me.
But I'll tell you, Sammy Davis once told me the first time I ever opened for Sammy was in Las Vegas, and I had never been to Las Vegas, and it was at Caesar's Palace, and they had rehearsal and everything, and now we're all in our dressing rooms. The show was going to start in a couple hours, and I walked out of my dressing room. I'd never worked in Vegas, and now I'm walking on stage at Caesar's Palace by myself. I'm just getting familiar with the stage, and as you know, stage has the boards, what they call the boards, on the stage. Sammy saw me and came out of his dressing room, and he walked out, and he said, "Are you a little nervous, babe?" He always called me babe. "A little nervous, babe?" I said, "Well, yeah, it's opening night, and I'm opening for you. My name's on a marquee with Sammy Davis Jr., and it's my first time in Vegas." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "See these boards down here on the stage?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You own those boards. You earned those boards. You paid dues to get here." He said, "This is your stage, not theirs. If they could do what you do, they'd be up here. They can't do what you do. That's why they're out there. So don't let them take this from you. This is your stage." And I tell young comedians this for years. Here's the way it goes, Josh. Here's the way you walk out on stage every night. Most comedians think of, when they're new, they think of it like that's their house. I'm invading their territory. I'm walking into their territory. This is our house. The way it works, Josh, I tell the young comedians, your wife says to you, "We got 20 people in the living room and dinner isn't ready yet, honey. Go tell them some of them stories about you growing up and blah, blah, blah." And you walk out into the living room and you say, "Hey, dinner's going to be ready in a few minutes. But I got to tell you, when I was growing up and I was going to school, it's a conversation, not a presentation. Is it your act? You damn right it's your act. It's your job to make it look like it's not your act. It's a conversation you're holding, and this is our house." So I tell the young comedians, think of that. When you walk in that room, you're not invading their territory. They're in our house, and it gives you a better state of mind, is my point.
Yeah.
But can I tell you a quick Letterman story?
Yes,
Oh,
please.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Dave and I are the best of friends and been the best of friends. He calls me about a month ago. He said, "Tom, every time you do an interview or every time I do an interview, we tell the same story. Where you were on at the Comedy Store. I had just arrived that day from Indianapolis with my red pickup truck. And you came off stage, and I said to you, I really enjoyed your set, Mr. Dreesen. You know? And I said, what is your name? He said, Dave. I said, where you from? He said, I'm from Indianapolis. And I said, oh, I'm from Chicago. And I start talking sports with him. And because I'm so extroverted, I kept talking to him and talking to him. And we became friends, you know, and I didn't realize what a shy guy he was, how introverted he was, or I would have respected that. But by the time I realized that, we were good friends, and we've been buddies ever since. He said, well, you always tell that story. That's how we met. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm going to shut this up.
Wow.
It's probably Letterman. Anyhow, but he said, it's a boring story, Tom. It's a boring story. I said, but it's the truth. He said, I don't care if it's boring. From now on, let's tell people, you came off stage, I stole some material from you, and you beat the shit out of me in the parking lot. I said, now, why would I tell that story? He said, well, because it's a better story. I said, Dave, you have millions of fans. I'm going to walk down the street and have me dodging bullets. He said, it's a better story. Now, 2 weeks go by, he calls me. He said, do you know the governor of Illinois? And I said, I met him, but I don't know him. I said, but I do know the speaker, the Senate Majority Leader, John Cullerton in Illinois. He said, well, he had a serious problem. His wife had a son that was a grown kid that was autistic, and they had a plot of land there that all the autistic adults were planting corn and beans and stuff like that. And when it grew, they would give it to the homeless. And now the state was going to come and take that property away. And Dave said, I want to try to help if I can. I put him in touch with the speaker, the Senate Majority Leader of the Illinois General Assembly. But I told John Cullerton, I said, John, he said, oh, Tom, I'll help Dave. We're going to take care of that problem. It's already being taken care of. But I'll take care of that. I said, would you talk to Dave? He said, oh, I'd love to talk to Dave Letterman. I said, do me a favor. When you tell him you're going to help him, tell him the only reason you're helping him is because I beat the shit out of him in the parking lot at the Comedy Store. He said, okay, I'll do that. So he talks to Letterman. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. I said, hello. And Letterman said, didn't I tell you it's a better story? I told you it's a better story. But we were coming out of the Waldorf Astoria in New York one time, going out the back way, heading to a gig because Frank couldn't go out the front door, he'd get mobbed. But he had an apartment in the back of the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and the limo was waiting for us. We were going to rush out and do a show. And as we were running out, the security was taking us to the limo, and a woman jumped out of the doorway. The doorman told me she'd been hiding back there for like 5 hours in the back. And she started screaming, Mr. Sinatra, please, Mr. Sinatra, please, please, Mr. Sinatra. And the security was holding her back. And we were getting in the limo. And Frank finally turned around and he said, what is it? He walked back to her. She said, Mr. Sinatra, my husband is home sick, very, very ill. And if you could sign an autograph, it would mean the world to him. And he said, sure. And he's signing the autograph. And she said, oh, what beautiful cufflinks. They were $1,000 cufflinks. They're very expensive cufflinks. I know where he got them. And he said, thank you. And she said, beautiful. He signed the autograph and he took the cufflinks off and he said, gave them to her. And he said, give these to your husband. She said, oh, no. I was just admiring them. He said, no, I want your husband to have them. Now we get in the limousine and I said to him, Frank, that was beautiful, but why did you do that? He said, Tommy, if you possess something that you can't give away, then you don't possess it. It possesses you. And I never, ever forgot that. He said, it's okay if somebody said, gee, I like your Mercedes-Benz and you don't give it to them. But the truth is, he said, when you're shaving and you're looking at that guy in the mirror, you got to admit to that guy, that car owns you because you can't give it away. And he said, nothing you have is yours. Nothing. He said, Aristotle Onassis, the second he died, that mansion, that yacht, that private jet, all those things transferred. The second he died, they transferred. That shirt you have on you, if you die tomorrow, somebody will be wearing it. We're only using those things, you know, so nothing you own. So it you know, that, and then in closing, on his 82nd birthday, I went to his house. He was very ill and he died 5 months later. And sitting around was a lot of his friends, Gregory Peck and his wife, Veronique, and Sidney Poitier and his wife, Joanne, and Jack Lemmon and his wife, Felicia, and Robert Wagner, Jill St. John, Kirk Douglas and his wife, Ann. And we're waiting for the cake to come out. And Frank was off on the side, not well. We didn't know whether he was quite with us. Sometimes he'd be with us, sometimes he wouldn't. And he was eating over, a woman was helping him eat, the woman that took care of him. And somebody said, gee, where's the best place to live? Making small talk, waiting for the cake to come out. And Gregory Peck said, Veronique and I have a villa in France and we like it there. And Kirk Douglas, Robert Wagner, Joe St. John said, we have a home in Aspen and we like it there. And Frank in the corner with his head down said, the best place to live is where your friends are. And everybody turned around and went, whoa, whoa, yeah. My point of this story is, here's a man, arguably the greatest career show business has ever known. Oscars, Emmys, all the awards, amassed a fortune, hit records. In the end, it wasn't about any of those things. It was about relationships. That was the last lesson Frank Sinatra taught.